You are watching William Patterson University Television.
On November 12, 2018, we lost one of the most influential comic book writers of our time. Stanley Martin Lieber was born on December 28, 1922, before legally changing his name to Stan Lee. He began his career as an assistant for Timely Comics, rising through the ranks and becoming an editor of the company at the age of 19. In 1942, he enlisted in the United States Army and served in World War II until 1945. Following his return, Lee would become the editor-in-chief of Timely Comics and to begin his spectacular rise to become an entertainment legend. Stan Lee would go on to co-create many iconic superheroes like Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and the Avengers. These heroes would lead Timely Comics to becoming Marvel Comics we all know today. Stan Lee is the heart and soul of Marvel. As the MCU continues, we will not forget the inspirational mind that laid the groundwork for it all. Thank you, Stan Lee. You will be missed.
Look great, Hef.
Milwaukee. A man drank one of those Guarana sodas.
Yeah. Moment.
Larry King.
Larry!
Did it work? I thought he'd be taller.
Elvis.
Superheroes in New York? Give me a break.
One more time. This is Fritz, everybody. All right.
Can I have my shoe back? Oh, man. I am so fired.
Look at Mr. Smiles over here.
You like art?
Where's your wife?
Excelsior.
She's crazy stupid fine, right? The bartenders are all like, yeah, crazy stupid fine.
Are you Tony's stank? That is hilarious. Anyway, before I was so rudely interrupted, at that time, I was a Federal Express man. Don't make me come down there, you punk. Now don't you move. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be. You know what? I think I'll just take these. What's the matter with you kids? You never seen a spaceship before? Well, the 60s were fun, but now I'm paying for it. You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
With me today are Samori, Stephanie, and Matt to discuss the life and legacy of Stan Lee. Thank you guys for joining me today. I know we've had a really rough week in terms of dealing with the loss of Mr. Stan Lee. So Stephanie, I want to start with you. Who is the most important character that Stan Lee created to you?
Easily Spider-Man. I didn't know much about like superhero comics or movies or anything. And then I saw Spider-Man 2 in the theater back in, what was it, 2003, 2004 when it came out?
The olden days.
Yeah. And I was blown away. I remember getting the Spider-Man 1 and 2 DVD box set for my birthday that year. You know, I saw Spider-Man 3, which to this day contains my favorite Stan Lee cameo. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, like, we always know him for his cameos these days. But Matt, I wanted to talk about, you know, what was something that he created that you just can't live without in your current life?
Honestly, I'm going to have to go with Spider-Man. I mean, like, from my childhood, I grew up watching the Tobey Maguire movies. They were my childhood pretty much, and then all the Spider-Man like Lego sets came out, and I would have fun building those and stuff. As a kid, I was never really into the comics, but now, you know, I've been doing like research into like the characters and stuff, and it's just, it really took such a wildly creative mind to come up with these deep stories that told like both sides of the character of Spider-Man, you know, how the character of Spider-Man himself is so inspirational, how like he has to be Peter Parker and he's secretly Spider-Man, you know. Yeah, it's just, I don't know.
Samori, what about you? What's
I'm going to go a little different. I'm going to go Daredevil. Daredevil's one of my favorite characters in anything. And just the way he depicted Matt Murdock in Daredevil and the way his law firms with Foggy Nelson and just the stories he made, it's just awesome, just completely awesome. The first thing I saw was Daredevil, even though the movie wasn't that good. I loved the movie when I was a kid, and I continued to read more into Daredevil, and that just made him my favorite Marvel character.
So I want to just ask you guys, Stan Lee, we kind of know him for the comic side of things. He just writes these incredible characters with incredible backstories. But he also was kind of like a revolutionary on a soapbox with some of his ideas. You look at X-Men, which is all about accepting diversity, accepting people who are different than you. And like you said with Spider-Man, it's all about living that double life. How do you change different sides of your personality? So Matt, like, what is something that Stan Lee kind of not stood up for, but like wrote into his comics that makes us today here more accepting of everyone?
Honestly, just to be the best you can be, I think was one of his real like touching kind of points that he kind of pushed in his comics. I mean, standing up for what you think is right, through the different stories he told through the X-Men and Spider-Man and Iron Man and whatnot. The heroes just kind of face these like moral like battles, you know what I mean, that we can kind of identify with in our everyday lives, like what's right and what's wrong. And he kind of pushed this idea of kind of like looking into yourself and kind of figuring out for yourself what you think is right and what's wrong.
So Stephanie, I want to ask you, what makes Stan Lee so much different? And we've had Batman creator Bob Kane pass away. We've had other influential, we had Carrie Fisher pass away. Mm-hmm. What makes Stan Lee just stand head and shoulders above everyone else in importance in our culture?
I think Stan Lee is kind of like, he's more or less the father of our hobby. And the Marvel movies there's like 20 of them now. They've dominated popular culture for the last like 10 years, and even before that with like Blade and the original Spider-Man movies and the Fantastic Four movies nobody wants to remember and all that. But what makes Stan Lee different is that Stan Lee was the creator that was involved and was there and he really wanted to make sure that these characters brought across a good message and were really inspirational for the young people that were reading these comics and now watching the movies.
So Samori, I want to ask you one last question. We've seen in the past week people grieving, but also some people in the media coming out saying that grieving for Stan Lee or remembering his work in this holy light is childish and that comics are for children and not for adults. What do you have to say to that? What does that say? No, Stan Lee's work is important whether you're 3 years old, 103 years old.
I think that's bogus, and whoever makes that claim, they're idiots. To me, he just gave kids so much imagination, and he had such a creative mind. He gave a lot of kids like power to see, like they see Spider-Man, they want to be Spider-Man. Like he gave a lot of people their role models. So whoever thinks that, I think they're total idiots, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's just, it's kind of like, well, if you inspire a kid when he's young and he grows up to be an adult, he can grow up to be an adult that does great things. So why are you going to hate on the guy who inspired a kid to do those great things? It just makes no sense. We will all miss and remember Stan and his characters and the worlds he's created forever. But don't go anywhere because Press Start will be right back with Franchise Face Off. Thanks, guys. That was